few months ago, or in fact, just a few weeks ago, my wife Melinda and I took our 3-year-old grandson to the first movie that we've ever taken him to. Big day in our lives. You know, we had the car seat in the back of the car. We had him loaded up in there. We were taking him into a movie. We asked him which one he wanted to see. It was the Lego movie. Now, I've played with Legos with both my kids and now with my grandkids. But the idea of sitting there for an hour and 20 minutes and looking at a bunch of Legos in a movie was just really more than I thought I could bear. But you know, when I sat down in the movie, I began to see that it was much like all the other good and evil kinds of shows. There were people who were fighting for the little guy, fighting for what was right, and there were people then that were trying to be who were the villains, trying to exploit them and make life miserable for them. And it went on, and Legos kind of fought, and they were fighting back and forth and trying to rebel, and everything was just going really well, and the good guys in the movie won. The people with the white hats won. When I was walking out, my little 3-year-old grandson looked up to me and said, "Jojo, it's really nice when you can be old enough to finally have a name like that, like Jojo." He said, "Jojo, that Lego movie was weird." And I said, "Yeah, Murphy, it was weird." But I was thinking in my mind, I really thought the Lego movie was a shame. Because you see, the villain in that movie's name was Mr. Business. The person that was trying to exploit and control all of those others' name was Mr. Business. And so where Murphy left thinking that was weird because Legos were doing things that Legos ought not to do, I left very frustrated because it was showing business through the eye to the public and through the eyes of these producers is something that was bad. But as frustrated as I was, I think that movie raised two very important questions for me. The first question is exploitation and control the only way that we can zealously pursue business? And then the other question was, is there some way that I can live with integrity? Integrity, which is more than ethics, which is really the alignment of our lives with a higher calling. Can I live with integrity and still be successful in business? Suresh was remembering his early childhood. He remembered growing up on that farm, that hard-scrabble farm that was on the outskirts of a small village in India's northern district of Moga. He remembered that one old rib-showing buffalo cow that his parents had. He remembered the bare subsistence of most of his days. He remembered the many nights that he went to bed hungry. But today, as an adult, as he was remembering those things, he was standing on the street corner in that same village in Moga. And he looked there where in his childhood electricity and education and health care were just unheard of. He looked now, and on the street corner to his right, the next street corner, he saw the primary school. And looked a little farther down the road on his left, and there was the secondary school. And then he looked up above, and there was electricity going to every house in that village. And then he looked across the street and saw the medical clinic where physicians practiced on a routine basis. And then he looked down to the very edge of the village, and he saw the building that housed the organization that was responsible for all the improvement in that village. From going to bed hungry, he looked down and he began to see that building. As he was thinking back about his childhood, he remembered that he went to bed hungry, that they could barely get by, and now he thought about his own kids, and they weren't going to bed hungry. In fact, they were enjoying luxuries that were unheard of in his life. As he looked down at that building, he noticed that that building was not a government agency. That building did not house an NGO, nor did it house a charity. The building that housed the organization that made all the difference in this village, and in fact throughout the district of Moga, housed a Nestle dairy. You see, business made that difference. It was business that was able to bring in that kind of commerce. It was business that was, by commerce, was able to bring in that kind of societal improvement. You see, business doesn't have to be about exploitation and control. It can be about positive social change and positive societal benefit. Nestle started a couple of decades ago in Moga trying to put a dairy in place. And in order for that dairy to be functioning, they had to have a consistent supply of good milk. Well, when they got there, they found that people were just barely getting by. There was not a good supply of milk. So what Nestle decided to do was to begin to build the infrastructure to support the dairy that they wanted to have in Moga. And so they taught farmers how to raise feed crops so that their cows would have enough to eat, and therefore through that nutrition would be able to produce more milk. They brought veterinarians in, and they began to send them out to the farmers to raise the health of their cows, because about 75% of the calves in that region were dying. And so there was no way for those farmers to really get ahead and to build a herd that could supply the quantity of milk that Nestle needed to have in their factory. They began to realize, they realized that the farmers really didn't have a means to transport that milk safely from their small farms to the dairy itself. And so Nestle went out, and in each of the small villages in Moga, in a dozen small villages, Nestle went out and built small refrigerated dairies so the farmers could get their milk to that dairy and collect it and then transport it to the major manufacturing facility that Nestle had built. And in doing all of those things, in trying to be economically viable as a business, in the exercise of commerce, that region began to improve. When Nestle started down that journey, there were about 180 milk-producing farmers in that region. Today, there are over 75,000. When they started, there was not a dairy to be found in any of the little villages of Moga. Today, there are over 650. The per capita income in Moga is dramatically better than any of the districts around them. They have 5 times the number of healthcare doctors in their areas, all because of commerce. And today, what they really have is competition. Competition that has made Suresh's village dramatically different. And so what we begin to see in the story of Suresh is completely opposite of what we saw in the Lego story. Rather than building a business that exploits and controls, Suresh experienced the power of commerce, the power of economics to change the lives of people around him. Just like Suresh, Sue today is standing on the street corner of her town. And she's thinking over some job opportunities that she has. Some of you who are seniors are trying to think of the same kinds of things. And she's trying to decide, am I going to take that soulless job that basically pays the bills and gives me the resources so that outside of work I can pursue my passion of helping the world be a better place? Or is she going to continue to look to find a place where she can take her business skills and align that to actually produce something worthwhile? Jane is in that same town. She's about a mile down the road. She's a little bit older. She's sitting in an office building there about a mile down the street of that same town. And Jane is looking at this advertising proposal. And she's trying to decide, am I going to run this advertising campaign that basically exploits people to buy products they cannot afford? Or am I going to live with integrity? You see, it really is all about choosing. Mr. Business in the Lego movie chose to exploit and control. Nestle in Moga chose really not necessarily for altruistic reasons, but for commercial and economic reasons. They chose to invest in a community, and that community prospered. Sue and Jane are having to make those same kinds of choices, because whether you choose to exploit and control, or whether you choose to use the power of economics to change the world around you, business is agnostic about those choices. Business can be used to either end. Business can be used to exploit and control. It can be used to make the world a better place. It's agnostic about how it's used as a tool. So that means it's within each of our abilities, it's within each of our choices, each of our control, to decide how we're going to use that tool. Are we going to use business only for our own good, only to get what we think is best for us? Or are we going to be able to take the skills that we're learning in business and apply them in a way where business can have the sustaining power of economics to make the world a better place? That's the choice that we face. That's not a choice that business as a discipline creates. That's a choice that we have to answer. So as we face that choice today, I hope that you will choose passion, pursuing the passions that you want to pursue in life. I hope that you'll choose integrity, the alignment of our lives and our actions to a higher calling. And then, if you make those two choices, I believe you can choose business as the tool to deliver on that passion and on that integrity.